What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. Today is a special lunch live, so thank you for joining us. And before I forget, tomorrow we're doing a 5 p.m. Eastern show, Friday, 12:30, and then we'll be back to normal next week, 7 p.m. live all week long. Today, of course, we dive back into the Lori Vallow Daybell story, day 3 of her long-awaited murder trial inside a Boise, Idaho courtroom in Ada County, Idaho, to be specific. It is the trial of the so-called Doomsday Mom, the wildly twisted story of a seemingly loving mother, a devout member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who becomes involved in the deaths of as many as 5 people, including her own children. Best guest today, she is back. Judge Ashley Willcott, a former judge, trial lawyer, and mediator. She hosts Court TV's live coverage weekdays from 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And of note, for the subject of the Lori Vallow Daybell story, Ashley is a certified child welfare law specialist and was the governor-appointed child advocate for the state of Georgia. And then we have Susan Constantine. She is one of the nation's leading jury consultants, also a body language and communication expert, so I need to sit up straight. She is the owner of the Human Behavior Lab and has appeared on every show imaginable, including Dateline Today, Fox and Friends, and so many others. And then a first-time guest coming over, recovering from a cold, Letitia Osler. 20 years of experience as a litigation consultant. She's trained in the effective use of neuroscience research in the courtroom, and in addition is a seasoned consultant with extensive jury trial and litigation experience. So thank you all. Quick reminder, you can follow us on Facebook, Insta, on Twitter at Podcast STS. I'll put out all the show times on Twitter and Instagram. And of course, you can support us as a YouTube member or on Patreon. Court started a while ago in Boise, and Lori Vallow today, I know this is the question everyone wonders. She's wearing a black shirt and dark rimmed glasses. Susan Constantine, out of the gates to you. They're trying to make her look a bit demure. Yesterday, she was wearing a cardigan. Is this what you would expect from a physical appearance standpoint?
The cardigan, yes. The black glasses and the black top, absolutely not. I mean, the whole thing is this, she's part of this whole dark, cult kind of background. So why do you want to play into it? Part of what I've done is create an image for a defendant when they're ready to go into trial. Choose their wardrobe depending on what's being presented that day. It's so important. The color psychology, when somebody's looking at it, what emotion does it provoke? So black was not a good selection.
And Letitia, do you agree with that as a fellow jury consultant?
Oh, absolutely. She's already. I was reading the comments from yesterday's reviews, and they already call her the zombie defendant. Because she was talking about her children being zombies before they went, missing, which is crazy. As a defense, if we were trial consultants for the defense, we want to humble her a little bit, make her look like a greedy mother, have some kind of emotion, because she's going in the gateway, way far behind at this point, in my opinion. What do you think?
And Judge, I'll let you weigh in on that as well, since you're an anchor on Court TV. Obviously, appearances, and I hate to say this, maybe even more so for women than men, even though it is 2023, but everyone's going to be looking at her. And again, she was wearing a black shirt, dark rim glasses. She was in I believe, a black cardigan the other day. You agree with Susan and Letitia? Is this the wrong look for someone who's the so-called Doomsday Mom, involved in a cult-like, part of this strange part of this religion that she took up?
So I have two thoughts. The first is, yes, I agree. We have death, doomsday, cult, black, not a good thing. But I have to say this. We know, all of us know, juries notice everything. Right now, they're questioning potential jurors. They're noticing exactly what she's wearing. But I also have to believe a case of this caliber has someone helping pick out what color she should wear, what she should do and shouldn't do. So I'm a little surprised by it from that perspective.
Well, they should have hired Susan or Letitia. Obviously, they made a mistake by not doing that, but maybe
Yep.
there'll be another trial, potentially in Arizona. So maybe they'll hire Susan and Letitia for that one. Julie Frew updating us in real time here. It's two more than what I had on my list, on my notes. 32 jurors as of now have passed into this pool of 42 potential jurors. Once they get to 42 potential jurors, then they can begin striking to get down to 12 jurors and 6 alternates. Susan, can you just kind of take us into this world right now? They filled out questionnaires last week. Those who passed the questionnaires are now present, being questioned further. How critical is this time for both the state and the defense?
It's very critical because the juror questionnaire is the foundation in which they're starting to remove those other jurors, right? They don't qualify. So everything that's on that juror questionnaire is already kind of like a pre-interview, so to speak. So we've already know, which ones are not going to be able to pass and some of them that are not. So now you're down to the last 40, right? This is where voir dire starts. So this is the great part. And I think the trial consultants and judge will agree with me on this. This is the time where we get to find out more about who these people are, their values, their belief system, their past experiences. All of these things are really vitally important to help to understand how that person really thinks. Can they then be fair and impartial? So the question is not if they can, it's will they be fair and impartial? So that's kind of a little bit of a shift. So this part is really important, that they would use their preemptory strikes really well and very strategic. This is the part that I love. It's like playing chess, right? You're trying to figure out who they want to strike, who you're trying to keep and keep that silent so they don't really know. But you've already had them kind of pre-qualified, profile, so to speak, what you're looking for. In a perfect world, yes, you can get some of them, but you'll never get all of them.
And we're going to get into there's some interesting things that just came up this morning, and Boise is about 2 hours behind the East Coast, which is where I'm coming to you from. As a matter of fact, all of us except Letitia, who's on the West Coast. But Letitia, can you take us in just like Susan did? What is the process that they're all going through right now? Just a lot of questioning. What is that like for the potential jurors? They're sitting there, and I assume they're waiting their turn to be questioned individually. When that is happening, they're turning off the feed that is coming from the courtroom, so it's more private. But again, just pull back the curtain from your own experience. What are these potential jurors going through this morning?
Depending on what team you are, I call it the process of deselection, not selecting, because we're not selecting, because otherwise we're selecting the other team's thing, correct? Right now, you're trying to pick out the biases that may be harmful to your case. The legal team is very strategic about their questioning and choosing the correct juror to actually ask the questions so they could start deliberating within themselves, so we could actually abstract information that may benefit during the deselecting process. I like it that way because that way you're able to, direct questions to a particular juror that you're not going to pick, but it's very outspoken and it's going to kind of get the ball rolling for the rest of the panel. And I think that's how attorneys, the legal team begins to deselect. I call it high risk, low risk. And I start from my high risk. I know that I'm going to start at high risk, especially in a case like this. Every juror for the defense is high risk. And I'm going to deselect the most crucial risk factors out of that juror. And the only way doing it is by asking the right questions and abstract the correct information.
And that's an interesting way to look at it, high risk versus low risk. Special shout out to Frankie Figs, who went above and beyond when she got news about my father. So thank you to you, Frankie. And of course, always great to hear from our favorite Idahoan, Papa Bear in Moscow, Idaho, the home of those tragic quadruple homicides. I wanted to get this question, which I will put back up for the judge here, even though it takes us off the jury course for a moment. The judge, I'm curious to get her take on this. Carrie G writes, do you all think Lori will throw Chad under the bus to save herself? What do you think, Judge?
Well, I had this entire discussion with a legal analyst guest yesterday because it is the $1 million question, because that is going to give her a defense, right? If she does, that's a really good defense to mount. Then you have an opportunity to maybe be found guilty of not all of the charges if you can say he did it, not me. Here's the thing that I don't know, and I'm not an expert with the mental aspect of it, but she has said, and it appears as if she was doing things because she got under his spell, so to speak, of things that she should do. But does that really mean that she'll throw him under the bus? Or instead, is she going to be loyal? Is she going to be devoted and dedicated to him as her husband, to speak no ill of him? I can't decide which way she's going to go.
And what about the flip side? Carrie brings up the other side, wondering if Lori has any notion Chad will betray her. Because that, we've spoken. I haven't had her on yet because of what happened with my father, but we were going to have Skye Borgman on the show, and she is going to come on next week. She is the director of Sins of Our Mother, the Netflix film, and she has come out publicly to say, Skye has, that she thinks that Chad will turn on Lori. Judge, you agree with that? Your hand is raised.
Absolutely, I agree with that. I see no reason why he won't throw her under the bus to save himself, especially if you believe the narrative that we've pieced together based on some factual things that we know, that she has been in his spell, so to speak. That's my word, nobody else's, but that he's the leader. He's the dominant one. I think he's going to save himself.
Hello from Ohio. Susan, I think you wanted to jump in there as well. You think Chad's going to turn on Lori?
Yeah, I think Chad's going to turn on Lori. And just what Judge Ashley was saying is that he has the one that's been the persuader. She's the one that's been persuaded. So he's the one in control. He's the power guy, right? So I have an inkling that she may not throw him under the bus, because when I watch her demeanor in the courtroom, that smiling, that smirking, that not taking it serious, there's a part of her, I think, that she believes that she is still this immortal person, that nobody, even if they were to shoot through her, is going to kill her. That there's something after that. I'm not so sure that she is de-indoctrinated yet. So I'm going to kind of lean towards the fact that she may not throw him under the bus. I think she's going to think there's hope there.
He's been more like a narcissist.
Yes.
And remember that the victim is always afraid of the consequence. So she may be afraid of the consequence of whatever, he's telling her, if they're still communicating.
And Letitia, I was going to ask you, there have been a lot of reports. We have people live tweeting. Gigi McKelvey, I always love to give her a shout out, and Lori Hellis, who've both been on the show. Gigi has the Pretty Lies and Alibi podcast, where she has covered this from day one. And Lori Hellis is writing a book on the case and has a blog, the Lori Vallow Story. But they have been tweeting and reporting that there's been a lot of laughter coming from Lori Vallow. She's laughing with her attorneys. The judge, and I think Susan said this off the top, that the jurors, the potential jurors, are watching everything. Does the defense need to get in there, her team, and say, stop laughing because they are watching you?
That could be an issue. The jury takes their job serious, and we're talking about children. And if she doesn't want the jury to literally hand her the life term, that she may be looking at, her legal team needs to change her demeanor, her presence, the way she portrays herself, the way she walks into the courtroom. They need to change her demeanor. Definitely do something about it.
Susan, back to the clothing issue for a moment. What would you dress her in?
I would dress her in softer colors, pastels, fabrics that are with some soft texture to it. Stay away from anything that's shiny. I would stay away from anything that's suit-like, things that are more unconstructed, things that are more flowy. I think anything in that category that makes her look soft and mother-like, I think that's where I would go. And just to kind of give you a heads up, in my career where I started out with was doing witness prep. I developed a clothing center for the Seminole County Public Defender's Office and wardrobe defendants for trial. So number 101 is how do you dress for court? And you have to work with your client and talking about that. The jury is, it's like a camera lens. They see everything. They see what you're dressed in. They see how you're reacting, your emotional displays. And then I teach them what to do and what not to do. So if I were on the defense, I'd be pulling her aside going, you gotta keep somewhat of a poker face. Think Casey Anthony. Casey Anthony was the great poker face of all times. And that worked for her.
So Judge Willcott, I was going to say, you're not the only one with a wardrobe stipend and wardrobe and makeup. Susan started that for defendants. And obviously, Lori Vallow is off to a poor start. You wanted to jump in, and then I'm going to get to another question for you.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to jump in. I love those kinds of closets that exist in different courts for defendants. And B, here's the problem every defense attorney has. Sometimes I've seen from the bench, it doesn't matter what the defense attorney says or does to advise their client. They've got a client who's going to behave the way they're going to behave. I can promise that this defense team has already explained to her, the jury's watching you. Please don't laugh. These are serious charges, even though you're proclaiming your innocence, that it wasn't you. It doesn't matter sometimes. And that's where the defense might have a problem with Lori Vallow Daybell.
And Judge, back to you here from DB. When you're all alleged to have killed 5 people, how is the jury going to think any other way than guilty? How do you respond to that question? Because this is why we have trials, right? So, it is possible. Susan just mentioned Casey Anthony. A lot of people thought she was guilty. So how do you answer a question like this?
Another one, O.J. Simpson, a lot of people thought was guilty. He was acquitted. So here's the thing about our criminal justice system. It's the best in the world. And juries, in my experience, A, take their job very seriously, and B, really do pay attention that the evidence has to show up beyond a reasonable doubt. So in our system, if you don't have the evidence to show beyond a reasonable doubt that she did it, she won't be convicted. And I'm not saying it'll happen, if you're able to effectively point the finger at someone else as your defense, that could work. So it's that beyond a reasonable doubt standard that could cause some not to be convicted.
And Carrie G writes, Lori goes through husbands like I go through a bag of Twizzlers. And I love that comment. And she follows it up with perhaps the black, Susan, the black attire is to indicate she's in mourning. That was my initial thought, but still not a good road to go down in terms of the wardrobe department.
Yeah, that was a pretty dangerous thing to do, in my opinion.
And Nellie says, I'm so bothered how we reinforce image by placing so much emphasis on clothing in this way. And I can totally get that. I understand it. But, first impressions, man or woman, I think they're looking at what you are wearing. Hi from the Netherlands there. Judge, to you, just to step away from this all, and I may have asked this to you the last time you came on, just strictly from a 360-degree kind of bird's eye view, this is a pretty nutty case all around. I mean, we just came off the Alec Murdaugh trial. We've got a similar number of dead bodies piling up. In this case, 2 children. Is this why it is so high profile? Just because of the sordid nature, how disturbing it is, and people are just kind of mesmerized that something like this could even ever happen?
Well, I think it's that in conjunction with the legs. What do I mean by that? This did not start out as we have 2 dead children. This started out as relatives saying, where are the kids, where are the kids, where are the kids? Finding out that the mother is in Hawaii getting married to Chad and still not really saying where are the kids. A court proceeding in a dependency matter where she was ordered to show up with the kids and she didn't. So it's the also building up of the true crime aspect of, okay, well, we don't know where the kids are. Maybe they're with a friend, maybe they're with family. And then that leading up to these other things that happen. And then eventually not only finding the bodies, but finding the way they were brutally killed and buried, very distinct differences between the 2 children in both of those aspects, and buried in the yard property belonging to Chad Daybell. So I think it's also the unbelievable aspect of an own mother, God forbid something happened to her children, won't even say to someone they're missing, I don't know where they are, they've been killed. All of those things feed in because this has legs and we don't even know the half of it yet, in my opinion. We're going to learn a lot more through the evidence, I think.
And Ketchup, who's a friend of the show here in Florida, I think it's the other way around. Chad's going to throw Lori under the bus and then run her over. Bespoke updating us. I love this in real time. We've got the best fans in all of true crime, STS Nation, at 11:08, which is 1:08 Eastern time, about 15 minutes ago. Nate Eaton, who is with East Idaho News, has been on top of this from the beginning. Shout out to him. Posted 33 of the 42 potential jurors have been selected. Letitia, back to you. It's 2023. Everyone's got one of these.
Mm-hmm.
How hard is it to select a jury, and an impartial one at that?
Well, this case, I think for most of us that do it, I think this is probably a very tough case because, one, I believe it has been changed on jurisdiction 200 miles, right? I believe that those are the facts. The case was moved, so they could actually pick a jury. So just that tells you how difficult it will be to pick an impartial jury in this case. I'm going to assume that most people will have common knowledge, and so you got to deal with those biases. There are so many biases coming into this jury pool that you, as a jury consultant, have to be very attentive to detail, facial recognition, seeing if they're agreeing with you, how they're reacting to the legal team's speech, the delivery, the theme. There's many elements. The attorney could say the wrong thing, and now we have lost a potential good juror. The opposing side could say the right thing and push a jury to your hand that you didn't think it was going to be a potential juror. We have, the ability to profile all these jurors that potentially come through the pool, but ultimately you will get the best data right there in the courtroom to make sure you are asking the right question and abstracting the correct answer so you can actually select those proper jurors for your case. I'm going to assume that for the defense, this is going to be a very tough jury selection.
And Susan, to you, same question, and I'll get the response from the judge also. 2023, you've got Twitter, you've got Instagram, you've got Facebook. It's almost impossible to turn your phone on, let alone a TV set, without getting headlines of the day. I mean, we saw without getting political at all, just factually, we saw the Trump indictment yesterday. The minute I would pick my phone up, I had 10 alerts on my phone. It was inevitable and unavoidable. This is not quite the scope of that, but it is still one of the more high-profile trials in this country. So in 2023, how hard is it to get an impartial jury pool?
You're never going to get a totally impartial jury pool. I think that you're always going to be challenged with people are going to come in with biases. And if you go in thinking that you're going to find somebody that has no bias, they're not human because we all have biases. The question is, can they or will they set it aside? So one of the things too to think about social media social media also tells the attorneys what's being threaded out there. When you talk about those whisper jurors, you know, Amy Singer, phenomenal, a jury consultant, done a couple cases with her, and she would see the different social medias, and she'd ask questions and she'd get answers back, and it would help us to develop our theme for the next day and how she was appearing or whatever case it was. I don't know if anybody knows it, but I have a facial recognition program that I couldn't even get attorneys to actually use, but it's called the Jury Lab, and it's done for this types of situation to do pre-trial intelligence, get a jury together, and then throw out there that you're opening your closing statements, key points of evidence, and watch what a mock jury, how they remote and how they feel about different aspects of it, so that when you walk into the jury, you actually have some sort of demographic factors you might be looking for, and some emotions that we know that are emoting that are either for the state or for the defense. And I'll tell you what I thought was brilliant, and I want to tell you what it's doing. It's sitting right over back here in my closet because I can't get attorneys to understand the value. And I have a full patent on it. So if you guys know of anybody, we need to be using this stuff. It's because it's great.
Susan, it sounds like you're sitting on. Yeah, it sounds like you're sitting on something pretty valuable. Go ahead, Leticia.
I've used her product and it's pretty phenomenal. I truly believe in cases like this, facial recognition on a mock trial, it is the way to go. Is it expensive? Of course. However, the benefit that the legal team gets from the data is unbelievable. You will go into the courtroom with confidence, knowing, okay, I know the markers I need to watch for, and I know the body language, I know the facial recognitions that I need to deselect, because now we're talking about 3 zones of our faces. Yep. You know, they're portraying emotion. And some, you know, the whisper, I call her the ghost jurors. The ghost jurors are the ones that have no fingerprint. Those to me are the most deadly jurors that you could ever have in your pool. Anita.
Those are those silent jurors, those ones you can't predict. But they do emote, and it will leak out through maybe a small little contempt or little eye raise or something. It will come out. But those poker faces really are hard. You know, you wonder if that's, you know, the stealth juror, you know, we're looking at that. So that those are hard, and even for myself, it's still challenging.
And right on cue, talking about seating a jury and the difficulty, Julie Frew letting us know, a friend of the show, that a current potential juror being questioned right now was dropped because that juror admitted they were watching the Netflix series and had knowledge of the case. So there you go. But Judge, I wanted you to chime in as well. 2023, got your cell phone. I see those monitors behind you in your office. A lot of people have the same thing. How tough is it in 2023 for jury selection to go?
Well, I think the key is, in a case like this, is it going to be tougher than a case that media isn't following as closely? Absolutely. However, keep in mind, it's not have they seen anything about the case? Have they heard anything about the case? But rather, or is it enough information that it is going to affect or make them biased? And if you're in the middle of the documentary watching that while you're on jury selection, by the way, probably not a good indication, but most people have heard about it. So you really have to find that line of hearing about it's okay. Is it going to affect your ability to be a fair and impartial juror is what you have to decide.
And Judge, couple legal questions. No one better to answer them than you. Astra 0193, chances of Lori staying competent when it really gets going. Is it possible we get 2 weeks into this trial and suddenly there's a sidebar and the defense or the state is concerned that she's off her rocker a little bit and she's no longer competent? Is it possible for that to happen?
You know, Joe, this is why I love you and don't like you, because you've put me on the spot with such a great question from your fan and put me right in the middle of it. Is it possible? Yes. What is competency legally in a proceeding like this? It is the ability for the person to assist in their defense, to understand the nature of the proceedings. Can someone during the course of a trial become incompetent? Yes. But here's my hesitation. Here's my opinion. In this particular case, I would be very, very cautious if Lori Vallow Daybell becomes incompetent during the course of the trial. I would question if it's true incompetence or not. I would then rely on an expert if I were on the bench to make that decision. So what might happen is maybe it halts the trial. Maybe an expert has to do an evaluation to make certain that is true incompetence versus feigned incompetence. But it could happen.
And then another one for you, and then we'll move back to the jury issues. From Aries Athena, if Lori turns on Chad, can he ask the state to be called as a witness to testify against her?
Well, I mean, it's a little unusual for someone to say to the state, I want you to call me as a witness, but it's not unusual for witnesses to come forward and say to the state, I have information. The state then assesses whether or not it is relevant, appropriate to have that person testify. Does it go to one of the elements of the crime? I'm going to tell you this, the state knows what's going on with both of these defendants. If the state at all thinks it's helpful to call one of them against the other, rest assured they're going to do it.
Total now, according to Julie Frew, who is our court reporter, the total is now 34. We're inching up to that 42 number. And people yesterday, legal experts, believe that we will have a jury seated by the end of this week. And right now, we are headed in that direction. And I appreciate this. Good evening from Poland. Joel, please accept my deepest condolences. I'm sending you, Carmen, your family, biggest hug. Thank you so much. STS Nation has really comforted us, and can't thank you guys enough. To be totally honest, I never thought that would be the case. But when my mother and I got literally thousands of comments, we were blown away, and it is helping her a lot and continues to help her. So I appreciate it so much, and so does she. One of the bigger issues here, Susan, is cameras are not allowed. And as far as we know, I've not heard an audio stream, but there is going to be, for a substantial fee, an audio stream. Gigi, who's on the show, did the math, 10-week trial. It's something like $6,000. So it prohibits a podcaster like me. I'm not going to spend that kind of money. Luckily, we've got big media outlets like Court TV that will, and I will grab it from them. But what about the fact, in terms of how it impacts jurors, that there are no cameras in a courtroom?
I think it's much better. I mean, because they don't have all the distractions. I mean, you have to think about that these are just ordinary people. It might have been the first time they're ever in a courtroom, ever in their entire life. They also might be some of them might be introverted. They don't like the attention brought on themselves. Then you've got others, of course, that like all of the media attention. So we have a mix of people. I think that the fact that there are no cameras in there, I think that it's actually a good move. That's just my own opinion.
And Letitia, same question to you. No cameras, obviously a very high profile case. Better or worse when it comes to the jurors and their, impartiality, that there are no cameras?
I have to agree with my colleague. Definitely better for the jury. It is hard enough. It is not a normal setting to be sitting there in front of, lawyers and judges and experts. It's not normal. Most, like she said, introverts probably get very nervous having cameras around. They come out, being questioned or, worry about safety. There's a lot of elements that go, the stressors of a juror in a case like this. At least in my experience, jurors get very nervous. And I've seen in some instances where the jury will ask for privacy, and the judge most likely granted in the cases I've been in.
And I can tell you, being a former news guy, a lot of times the way we select stories is based on video. That's just, the kind of the sad nature of the business. You need video to tell a story in broadcast news, not the same deal in print. But Judge, to you, the fact that this is not being televised on camera, does it impact Court TV's decision and how they cover this case?
Sure, I have a lot of thoughts. First of all, yes, I'm an anchor at Court TV. We rely on cameras in the courtroom, but that's not the reason I'm going to respectfully disagree. I do agree that the cameras affect jurors that these two ladies with expertise have described. And it's true, they can be uncomfortable and introvert, but I have to weigh that against our justice system being available to the public. We know there are overflow rooms where the public can go and watch this trial. but as much public that wants to watch it cannot do so in the overflow rooms. And so my perspective is trials are public. They should have TVs in the room. Now, you have to have the right precautions to ensure that no juror is ever identified by name, by face, by picture, that the safety of the jurors is protected first and foremost. So you have to have a lot of safeguards in place. It's not unfettered. If you're having cameras, that court has to make sure every safeguard protects the identity, everybody in that courtroom. Now, having said that, Joel, I forgot what your question was.
About does it impact court TV's editorial decisions, not having a camera in there, the way that you cover it less, do you cover it more, do you cover it the same?
Oh, we are covering every aspect of it that we can. We're relying on Nate. He is a friend to you. He's a friend to us because he's providing real-time updates frequently. And so we're able to utilize that information. We absolutely will be covering it. But some viewers have suggested that they are angry because they feel like it's a win for Lori Vallow, that here she is accused of these horrific crimes. She didn't want the cameras in the courtroom. The judge granted that motion, no cameras in the courtroom. They feel like it's unfair that she has this big victory.
And Judge, while I have you, Beverly Metters, the same last name as one of the prosecutors from the Alec Murdaugh trial, John Metters. I hope I don't know if she's related. Is it possible? I just wanted you to respond to this interesting question. Is it possible the defense team actually thinks she is guilty and really wants her found guilty, and that's why they are dressing her the way they're dressing her? Susan shaking her head no. It would be very unethical on the part of the defense. Correct, Judge? That would not happen. Or it'd be
it would not happen. Now, they might actually think she's guilty. Very separate question. They have ethical obligations, and every defense attorney I know, they do it to protect all of our rights, constitutional rights. That's what this is about. Not about whether or not she did it, but protecting the rights of the accused. So no, I don't think that would ever happen.
Ellen says hi from Denmark, followed here by our courtroom reporter who's not really in the courtroom, Julie Frew. 35 jurors now. Susan, we're getting ever closer to that 42 number. Once we get to 42, what happens at that point?
Well, then they can start striking the jurors. This is the time where now it's like this chess match, so they get to choose which ones they've got. I think they've got how many preemptories, Judge?
12 each side.
So that's right now. That's what they're going to be doing.
And so right now, the state and the defense I assume they're taking notes on all these jurors, and they already know a bunch of jurors that they're going to immediately strike, Susan?
Oh, yeah. I mean, my colleague, we know that we have a strategic plan of what we do, right? So we've already got planned who we want off. We have our little sticky notes, and we know which ones, all the demographics, things we like, and we're on the score system and everything else. We know which ones we want gone. So it is, I am not the one that deselects the jurors. I'm just telling them which ones are your dangerous ones. It's your job to figure out how to get them off. So that's my job. So that's what they're doing right now.
And Ann Vroom, a friend of the show, writes, Letitia, I'll throw this one to you. Do the guests know if either the state or the public defender team for Lori have hired jury consultants to advise throughout the trial? If so, how is that considered expense justified on state budgets? How does that all work? I know you might not know about the specific case, but in general, how does that all play out, Letitia?
In general, at least for San Diego area, I'm just going to, you usually have a trial consultant on contract. So if they have a jury consultant, they have it already on staff that they have contracted for a year or so. So it is not, it's not really an expense. They're under contract and they bring it in selective cases, at least in my experience.
And KCL is a friend of the show. Hello, STS Nation. Hello, KCL. She's been updating us as well. Judge, to you, are you surprised that this is not a death penalty case? It was ruled by the judge on death penalty was taken off the table basically because of technical issues. But are you surprised that a case this serious doesn't have death on the table?
Well, I will say two things. Number one, If you're going to have the death penalty, is this not the most egregious kind of case for which you want the death penalty, right? Because if convicted of these crimes, it's horrific, and I think death penalty might be appropriate. I'm not surprised that it is not a death penalty case for two reasons. One, Joel, you just alluded to, and that is the fact there were some issues with the death penalty in that state, them not being able to get the right chemicals to do the injections to put people to death, then considering other means. But number two is because of the competency issue. Yes, she's competent to stand trial right now. However, there have been issues in the past with her mental health. There may be, probably will be, likely will be issues with her mental health moving forward. Is that the right kind of person to exercise using the death penalty? So I'm not surprised it was taken off the table.
And Susan, WD-40, this is an interesting question to be posited, and it makes me think of another case that we're covering, which is the Dan Markel case, where the ex-wife's family, the ex-brother-in-law is about to go on trial for hiring hitmen. The hitmen have been convicted. The ex-wife of Dan Markel, a former boyfriend of hers, said that she could put him under a spell. She's got these big blue eyes. She would put him under a spell. And here, WD-40 is asking, do you think Lori will charm male jurors? She's had 5 husbands. She knows how to court men. Is this something that is a concern for the state?
Well, she's not quite the same age as what she was before, and certainly not the beautiful woman that we've seen prior. So back then, where she was very vivacious and beautiful, and she's able to wear her makeup and do her hair and all these things that looks,
I'm glad you're saying all this and not me, but I was thinking that. So thank you.
I mean, you're looking at her now, and she looks like she's been through World War III. She's been in jail for a long time. So, I think that male jurors are going to think that this is a woman. It's going to remind them of some bat crazy girl that she had met or dated before. And it's like, I think that she's just bat, crazy.
Candy writes, hi, Joel and all, finally catching a live this week. Good to see you. KCL writes, I don't necessarily think the prosecution, defense, and judge are asking the right questions in selecting this jury, ! I do think that they should have hired a jury consultant. I don't know that they didn't hire a jury consultant, and we will get into some of the specifics in just a moment, but it is always interesting to hear the court of public opinion. I guess it's easier to make calls from the sidelines always than being in the actual courtroom. But I think right now they're asking fairly standard questions so far. But one of the kind of the side stories in all this, and I'm interested to get your guys' take, is as far as I know, the Judge Boyce, still has not ruled whether Kay and Larry Woodcock, the grandparents, can come sit in court. There's supposed to be a ruling on this, but they are saying, and I'm going to quote here, this is a statement they put out, we continue to be victimized by Lori every single day, living life without JJ, Tylee, and Charles. That, of course, is the grandchildren and Charles Vallow. Then again, by possibly denying us the chance to be the face in the courtroom seeking justice for them. Judge, what's going on here? Why will the grandparents potentially not be allowed in the courtroom? And is that a problem with the judicial system that people so close to the family can't be there to try to get justice for their loved ones?
Well, it is strictly a legal answer as to why they cannot be there, because the children JJ was adopted. And as a result, these are biological grandparents. And once termination of parental rights happened and adoption of the child, they're no longer the legal grandparents. And the definition of who's allowed in terms of the rule of sequestration and who can stay in the courtroom does not include biological grandparents. And so if they're going to be a witness in the case, they can't be in the courtroom. So that's the legal answer, but let's put that aside. The judge, I don't know if will exercise some discretion to say, even though they do not fit the technical definition, they are family to these children. They're, in fact, some of the only family that, as far as we know, protected the children, wanted to know where the children were, cared for the children, loved the children, and were concerned for the children throughout all of this. And so I think there's a potential opportunity for a court to say, even though they don't meet the legal definition, they shouldn't be in the court for the trial. There's an opportunity to say, really, they stand in the position of parents, of relatives, and they should therefore be allowed in the courtroom. I don't know which way the judge is going to go.
And Judge, speaking of that, WD-40, right back at you with a question here. Anyone know if once Kay or Larry testify that they can then sit in the courtroom? And someone else asked, could they be called as the first witnesses so they have time to be in the courtroom properly?
Yes. Yes. And so the prosecution, if the judge says they can't be in the courtroom, then the state has to make a strategic decision to say, is it important to put them first so they can stay in the courtroom? Is that going to interrupt with the strategy of who comes up first? And I think that that's a possible solution. Put them on first, let them stay in the courtroom.
And Susan, KCL, right back with us. Why would the judge care? This is obviously the question she was bringing up, that she was wondering why they were asking. Why would the judge care if someone has served on a jury before? I have, and I don't see how that could be a deficit. What's the answer, Susan?
Well, one of the things that is on a juror questionnaire is if they've ever served on a jury before and if they've ever been a foreperson before. So they are already used to the process, and could they be an influencer? So I think that that's one of the reasons why.
And sequestration, Letitia, it's a word we hear. Judge Boyce, I think earlier this morning or yesterday, said he is not going to sequester this jury, but we know things can change from day to day. When is a jury typically sequestered? And isn't it a lot of times during a very high-profile case where the judge is worried that they might be seeing stuff that they shouldn't be seeing, as in this case?
And that brings me back about social media. I find that because cameras are in the courtroom, you tend to have a jury pool that is better behaved and will not do any misconduct, right? In this instance, I don't want to answer that question because I'm not very familiar to the facts of the case. I don't want to give the wrong answer on that. I'll probably pass it on to my colleague. She seems to know more about the case on this matter. But on this jury, I'm assuming if the judge keeps it in the same manner, then I don't think he's going to sequester the jury until the end of the case, in my opinion.
Susan, do you want to add to that? Do you have any idea?
Well, part of the jury instructions was on their behavior. If you read through the judge's instructions from the very beginning, was a lot about their demeanor. So, he made them very aware of it. And I have to share with you that when I sat through the entire Casey Anthony trial and George Zimmerman, because it was right here in my backyard, and even though that was extremely high profile, the jury was very well behaved. They did focus on who they need and what they needed to focus on. So I think that, what you're stating here is that they are on their best behavior because all of their eyes are on them. So they do have to act more appropriately, or also be more aware of how they're being forcing, because they don't know who's really watching them and who's analyzing them, because they're not stupid. They've watched probably enough programs like Court TV. Right? We all know that we're all out there analyzing these jurors, and they're maybe relating that this could be them, and people are also talking about them too. So that's my take on it.
And Anna, whose last name I will never try to pronounce, says if she loses, I'd like to see how she portals herself from the courthouse, of course, alluding to the fact that she said she could portal herself from one state to another, from Hawaii to Arizona. Judge, this is an interesting legal question, which I don't know the answer to. Amonte Yado writes, has Lori ever seen evidence pictures, such as explicit pictures of the children's remains, or will she see them during the trial for the first time?
That is such a great question. Here's how it works. The defense is entitled to everything that the state has and is going to present. That's called discovery, as well as exculpatory information. When you, as a defense attorney, get these documents, including these pictures, you always want to show your client. You need to tell your client this is the evidence, number one, they have that they're going to present. But number two, you don't want your client to be surprised. What if I'm not saying she would, but think about this. What if she sees it for the first time and her nervous reaction is to laugh? The jury's going to think she's guilty. So no, you always want to show your client those kinds of things prior to walking into that courtroom.
Carrie hits the nail on the head. Brilliant guests, and that's why STS does well, along with STS Nation. Rather be in Maui. That's not a bad place to be. And by the way, I heard they're getting a lot of snow in Idaho, which is hard to believe, beginning of April. But that is Mother Nature at work. People not happy about the lack of cameras. I also respectfully disagree. This goes back to our earlier conversation. The public at large, not just the ones that have access to be in person, have the right to view the trial. Just back on to this for 1 second, Judge. What about the fact that these are public courts? That they are supposed to be for the public. Why not? Why are cameras not part of that public definition?
I think we're moving that direction. Some states are working on legislation to say that cameras will be allowed. But until then, keep in mind that really the advent and the place that we have for seeing everything all the time on social media is relatively new compared to our judicial justice system, right? And so I think we're moving that direction right now, though. Generally, in many states, it's the discretion of the court. I still stand by, I don't disagree. I absolutely agree with your fan who just said that. You're right. The people who can get there isn't the public. The public is all of us. And the only way all of us can watch the trial, if we choose to, is to have it on camera.
And Baby Doll Love knows a good judge when she sees one. I like this female judge.
Thank you.
We've got a hi from Austria. We've got several continents covered here. Hi from Scotland with a comment. No cameras makes one think this court has something to hide that may or not be the case. But Susan and Letitia, on to some of the kind of the specifics of the day, just to peel back the curtain even more. One of the questions, Susan, that was asked is, can you convict someone if you can't say exactly how someone died? And this came from the state asking again if they'd be able to convict someone of murder, even if the state could not say exactly how the person died, whether they were shot or stabbed or strangled. One woman expressed some confusion about this question, but how important a question is that, knowing that as of right now, none of us, meaning the public, know exactly how these two young children were killed.
So that is actually a legal question. So that needs to go to Ashley. So
Judge?
Yes. It's weird. It's unusual. It sounds like, how is it possible to convict someone when you don't know what killed them? If you have an expert that can say it was definitely homicide, it wasn't suicide, it wasn't natural causes, it was homicide, then maybe it's not as important that you know exactly what killed them. So long as you show the evidence, it was homicide, and beyond a reasonable doubt, there's no other person. It had to have been this person that did it. Well, then you can still prove guilt.
Here's something that's interesting. It's taken me off course once again, but Ann Vroom is very bright and is always bringing up some salient points. She writes, the defendant may be on a heavy regimen of meds vis-a-vis her prior diagnosis treatment. So in my opinion, she is and will be somewhat oblivious of nuances of the trial. She's just there doing her gratuitous smiling thing. I mean, Judge, what do you do? She's had mental health battles. She was in a psychiatric hospital. We don't know, or at least I don't know what medication she's on. What obligation does the court have to know how she's being medicated so that, she is able to stand trial in a competent way? Do they have to let the judge know what she's taking?
This is why I would come on your podcast every day, because these questions are amazing. No, They don't have to tell the judge the medications that she's taking. When you have a client, you have to ensure that your client is assisting in the defense and competent. If she's on medications that you start to believe interfere with her ability to be competent, to understand the nature of the proceedings, to assist in her defense, that's when you have to raise it with the court and say, Your Honor, we have a problem.
Hot Coffee writes, I'm debating on writing notes on this case or not. Not crazy about having cameras in the courtrooms. I'm a freelance writer and started to write about true crimes. Susan, to you, that brought up another question in my mind, and that is in the Alec Murdaugh trial, Susan, Judge Clifton Newman did not allow note-taking. That trial lasted almost 6 weeks, I think just shy 1 day of 6 weeks, and that entire time, the jurors could not take notes. In this trial, they can. What is the advantage or disadvantage, Susan, for jurors to be able to document stuff by note-taking?
Well, I always like the note-taking because it shows me every time they put the pen to the paper and what's important. So I'm looking for a pattern of which attorney is speaking, what question is asked, and when they put the pen to the paper. So it doesn't matter what it is. I just want to know what that's because that's part of my analysis. So when you think about when they're taking notes, obviously, the advantage is that when they go back into deliberations, they can compare notes. And as you know, that different people see different things. So if you had a car crash and you had 5 people that saw the car crash, they're all going to have a different perspective. Doesn't mean that they're wrong, just means they're seeing it from different perspective. I think that's a good thing. The other thing is that I think about how people process information, if they're visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and then those that are not auditory and they don't have enough visual demonstration and demonstrative evidence, they're not going to remember everything that's told to them. I mean, just a fraction of it. So then you're back into deliberations and you're depending on what somebody else thinks and they're asking each other, do you remember when so-and-so said that? Well, that's not what I thought. I thought they said this. So I don't know. I think that's very dangerous for me, but I think that he was nailed because of his demeanor more than anything. His lying and his demeanor is what got him.
Frankie Figs has my back as always. Please hit the like button. Please do that. As my daughters say, it gets the algorithm chugging. Bespoke, this is an interesting comment. Writes, UK still have sketches for high-profile cases. The people pay for this availability in the US. If made unavailable, then money would have to come from somewhere else, surely. In this case, there is a sketch artist, but they're not a courtroom sketch artist. They are sitting in the overflow room, and it's being paid for by a media pool, I believe. So it is not being paid for by the state, but that is how we are getting some images of Lori Vallow Daybell inside court. Letitia, to you, and I'm curious, obviously, of your take on this, another kind of specific juror issue. The prosecutor, Rachel Smith, this morning asked a potential juror who served in Iraq if seeing graphic images or evidence in this trial would cause problems for him. He said no and would be fair if selected for the jury, as is, and he quoted, "That's my duty." Sounds like a veteran to say that. But that poses an interesting question. There are all sorts of different people, shapes, sizes, colors, backgrounds. What about an Iraq War veteran who might be triggered by seeing these horrific photos? Is that something you've got to think about, Letitia?
I definitely got to think about it. Well, one, you got to ask the question, what division did they serve? Are they in the front lines or were they, behind a desk? Those are questions you got to kind of abstract from the juror because you're not going to know. If you do find that the juror has somewhat of a PTSD, it is I call it high risk marker that I would analyze to make sure the legal team asks the right question out of that particular juror. You never know what triggers someone with PTSD. So maybe asking more personal questions. How do you deal with trauma? Have you had a death in the family? And see what kind of, you got to bring some kind of emotion that kind of connects the puzzle. Like you're playing chess. What moves are you going to make to make sure that you're getting the correct information, playing it right. So it depends. It really depends on the line of questioning. But I wouldn't say that this person cannot be impartial. I would just caution on the defense that they may be impartial depending on the life experience.
Susan, to you, this was another interesting example of what work you guys have cut out for you when you were working on jury selection. Again, the state asks a mother of 5 this morning, 10 a.m. local time, if she can be fair and impartial, and she responds flat out no, and then says, you wanted brutal honesty, right? The state responded yes, and motions to have the potential juror were dismissed. The defense does not oppose this, and the judge excuses the juror. There's all this talk about quote unquote brutal honesty and being brutally honest. This mother just simply said, no way I can be impartial. What kind of tightrope do you have to walk there with mothers specifically in this case, knowing that she's accused of killing her 2 children?
I went back and I did some research on the Andrea Yates case and also Casey Anthony and what was the profile of all those jurors. And I was surprised to see how many people actually the women had children, young children. So everybody is different. The fact that she said no, and without no, or I think, if there was any sort of hesitation, it'd be different. The fact that she was so emphatic about it, I think that, first of all, thank God that it was an individual voir dire, because if that was out in the gallery, I can just imagine how that would have polluted the rest of the jury pool, right? That felt the same way.
Bertie writes, Judge, I'm wondering if you know the answer to this, not to put you on the spot again, excuse me. Is this trial being recorded on video for historical purposes? If so, will this be accessible to the public someday?
That's all these great questions. As far as we know, it is not, and therefore it will not be. The judge has ordered very specifically no cameras.
So there will never be a day in the future where we can watch this, but you will be able to look at some of the sketches as I try to get over this cough. Letitia, to you, the judge announced first thing this morning that he met with attorneys from both the defense and the prosecution. Both sides raised challenges about 7 people in what was then just, I guess, a 15-member jury panel because of hardship and bias reasons. One juror didn't even show up. This was about one group here. Is it normal or typical for the defense and the state to sort of meet in the judge's chambers to talk about their concerns ahead of actually sitting the jury?
It happens often. At least in my experience, it happens often. Hardship is one. I had a oncologist, a surgeon on my pool a couple of weeks ago, and one of the parties didn't want to let go of the doctor, and the judge actually said, well, can someone else take the patient? And he's like, no, it's a cancer patient, and I'm the only one that knows his story, so I have to do the surgery. And I was shocked that even in that meeting, the judge did not excuse them. So I've informed my client that he should be the one. He would not be a good juror if he's made to be there under those circumstances. And to me, that was hardship. So hardship looks different, but they do discuss the hardships.
And we're going to wrap up in just a few moments. 00 Degan writes, residents of Idaho have paid over $3 million to investigate and litigate this trial. I think they paid enough to see this trial for free, not $6,000 for audio. This is an issue that's obviously going to continue to be raised as we move forward. Lorna writes, hi from London. Always love our Londoners. Kathy P in Arizona, friend of the show. Thumbs up, SDS Nation. Best guest always. That is for sure. Shout out to Steve Cohen, who does all the booking for the show and is a master at his craft. Lastly, Judge, before we get some closing thoughts, again, said it off the top, 5 people have wound up dead who are close to this couple. Both Lori and Chad Daybell charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and grand theft in connection with the deaths of JJ Tiley, and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder in the death of Tammy. And then they're also charged with financial crimes, Alec Murdaugh, with Miss Vallow facing, again, grand theft and insurance fraud. Of all the serious charges out there, how serious are these?
Very, very. And don't forget, it's up to children. And so any death that is an alleged murder is the most serious of crimes. But you add to that, for all of us that have any compassion, to think it's not just children, but their own children or her own children. His, by virtue of the fact he married her, is one of the most horrific kinds of crimes any of us can imagine.
Letitia Osler is a first-time guest on STS, but hopefully not a last-time guest. She has 20 years of experience as a litigation consultant. She is trained in the effective use of neuroscience research in the courtroom, and she is a seasoned consultant with extensive jury trial and litigation experience. And I know what my wife's going to say. Let's send her a ring light, and we're going to do it. Letitia, what advice would you give to the defense attorneys right now if you could offer them a nugget or two of your wisdom?
I would definitely tell them we need to prep your witness every single day before towards the next day. Number one, choose the key witness. And if the jury does not connect with her, she's going to seal her fate.
Succinctly and well said. Tracy Phillips, another great question here, and this one goes to the judge. A question I have from yesterday's show is, if somebody is ruled incompetent to stand trial, what is done to bring them to a stage of competency? Can anything be done, Judge?
Sure, absolutely. Therapy, working with experts, sometimes it's medication, but all of the things that we have to address that person's mental health can restore them, in some cases, to competency.
Susan Constantine, she is one of the nation's leading jury consultants. She's also a body, that's why I have to sit up straight, language and communication expert. She is the owner of the Human Behavior Lab. She's appeared on every single show imaginable. This one, of course, is her favorite, but she's been on Dateline Today, Fox and Friends. The list goes on and on. This is an interesting question for you, Susan. Miss Wee Lassie, given Chad's trial is potentially later this year, how might this affect getting new jurors for his trial? They may now know what the trial is regarding. Is that a problem? Does this taint his jury pool?
Well, that's going to really be based on if we can find a fair and impartial jury for him. It's the same process, no different. I don't think it's going to have any effect on it unless people have already watched the trial all the way through. And those questions are all going to be handled during voir dire. So, that's the craft of the attorneys to be able to sift out those that have not already formed an opinion.
Judge Ashley Willcott, a former judge, a trial lawyer, and a mediator. She is the current host of Court TV's live coverage weekdays from 3 to 6. So you better catch her in about 40 minutes. She is also a friend of the show now, and we hope to have her back very soon. CRISPR writes, are either Chad or Lori actually charged for murder or just conspiracy, and why, Judge? A final time to put you on the spot here before you head out.
Absolutely. And I know, Joel, you read the charges, and I don't have them right in front of me. My recollection is it is for both murder and conspiracy to commit murder, and you can be charged with both.
And a quick update here. Julie Frew has our back, saying court is back in session for the second group of jurors as we head to that magic number of 42. A quick programming note, we will be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern time, and then Friday at 12:30 or 1. I'm going to tweet out the exact time. I just want to thank the judge, Letitia, Susan, and say, love you, America. Love you, STS Nation. Have a great day, and we'll be back tomorrow.